Winterizing the powertrain not only extends the life of the engine, but also prevents what would amount to the most costly repairs should freeze damage occur. There are 6 primary tasks that need to be done to properly winterize the engine. Pay attention here because the order is important. First, add a fuel stabilizer like West Marine's Easy Store or Easy Start and top off your fuel tank. Ensuring your fuel tank is full reduces the air in the tank. Since air holds moisture, when the temperature drops, the moisture condenses and ends up as water in the bottom of your fuel tank. This can fill your water separator and cause starting problems in the spring. If for some reason you can't get to the pumps to top off your tanks, add some fuel water absorber to the tank before spring startup. Adding the fuel stabilizer is equally important. Stabilizing fuel prevents varnish buildup in the lines, carburetor, or fuel injectors from the long period of inactivity. This is also a great time to replace your fuel filter and water separator or drain the bowl and change the elements in fixed mount units.
The next task is winterizing the block with antifreeze. This prevents any residual water from freezing and cracking the block when it expands. Some yards avoid this step by removing drain plugs or opening petcocks in the block and blowing compressed air throughout the raw water cooling system. There is some risk in winterizing this way, as any residual water left in the block could potentially cause a crack. We feel flushing with antifreeze is not only easier, but a safer method of winterizing the engine. There are 2 types of antifreeze. One is a common automotive type of antifreeze like Prestone, known as ethylene glycol. This type of antifreeze is good for cars, but bad for boats. In boats with closed or freshwater cooling systems, like your car, this antifreeze is acceptable. These cooling systems use a heat exchanger, much like your car's radiator, and dissipate the heat into the raw water cooling system. Most boats, however, just have a raw water cooling system to cool the engine. This type of cooling system pulls water in from the lake or ocean and circulates it through the block and discharges it overboard. Since automotive type antifreeze is highly toxic, we will need to use a non-toxic variety for the application, since some or all of it will end up in either storm drains or in the waters where you use your boat. Non-toxic antifreeze, sometimes called marine or RV antifreeze, protects as well as the automotive variety, but can be flushed or discharged overboard or on land safely in the spring. This type of antifreeze is made from propylene glycol. The West Marine's Pure Oceans brand of antifreeze is premium virgin antifreeze, which means it has not been recycled. It also has corrosion inhibitors to protect the cooling system of the engine. There are different levels of concentration available for each. For engine applications, we like the highest concentration available, like this -100 antifreeze. Why use -100 when the temperature never gets below -50? Good question. What goes in as -50 may not come out as -50. There's always going to be some residual water in the block that lowers the concentration of the antifreeze, so the resulting freeze point may be much higher than the rated temperature. In more northerly states, even if temperatures don't get all the way to -50, it's still a good idea to opt for the extra protection. The small cost difference between the -50 and -60 or -100 antifreeze is a bargain for the peace of mind knowing that your boat will be safe no matter the weather. One other point to remember about non-toxic antifreeze: it has a slush point much higher than its freeze or burst point. In the case of -50, the slush point is +11 degrees. Slushing is okay and will not harm the engine or other systems.
If you have an outboard or stern drive, West Marine sells a do-it-yourself winterizing kit that makes this job even easier. The task of fogging the motor, which involves spraying a fine mist of oil into the combustion chamber to prevent corrosion, can be done at the same time using this kit. Products you'll need for this task are a winterizing kit, 4 to 5 gallons of antifreeze, fogging oil, and a motor flusher and garden hose. One other thing to mention: if you don't plan to change your oil, add crankcase stabilizer to your oil before you begin winterizing the block. It will help suspend the acids until spring and prevent internal corrosion. Start by hooking up your garden hose to a freshwater source and connecting the motor flusher to the raw water intake. Turn on the water source and start the engine. Allow the engine to warm up to operating temperature. This will allow the thermostat to open to ensure that water circulates through the entire block. This is very important. It also allows the fuel stabilizer to circulate through all the fuel lines in the carburetor or injectors. Turn the engine off. Hook up the winterizing kit to the motor flusher and remove the flame arrestor from the carburetor. Start the engine again. Open the valve to the antifreeze tank and watch for the antifreeze level to drop in the tank. You should see the antifreeze begin discharging from the exhaust. When the tank is nearly empty, begin spraying fogging oil into the carburetor. On lower horsepower motors, this will usually stall the engine. On higher horsepower motors, the engine will usually cough and sputter but may not stall. If this happens, spray a good amount of fogging oil through the intake and turn the motor off. Fogging can also be done by removing the spark plugs one at a time and spraying the fogging oil directly into the combustion chamber. The West Marine Easy Store Easy Start fuel stabilizer has polymers which help protect the combustion chambers from corrosion, but we like to fog for double the protection. You can be confident that what you can't reach by fogging will be protected by the Easy Store polymers.
For inboards, the procedure varies slightly. Warm the motor to operating temperature just as we did with the stern drive. Rather than using the winterizing kit, remove the raw water intake hose from the seacock and place it in a bucket filled with non-toxic antifreeze. Allow the water to circulate as before and fog when the bucket is nearly empty. If you own a diesel engine, fogging is not necessary. It's also a good idea to remove the water pump impeller and inspect it for wear. That's it, you're done. Well, almost.
Since we've warmed up the engine, this is an ideal time to change the oil. Why change the oil now rather than in the spring? Good question. Changing the oil in the fall accomplishes two things. One, it purges the old oil, which has become contaminated with residual acids from the combustion process. Left in your crankcase, the acids can corrode your motor internally, causing premature wear. Two, it allows you to just start the motor in the spring. Again, for some reason, if you can't change your oil in the fall, add crankcase stabilizer before you begin winterizing. While the motor is still warm, let's go ahead and change the oil. You'll need an oil changing pump, the correct weight of 4-stroke motor oil based on the manufacturer's recommendations, and a fresh oil filter. Since most engine drain plugs are not easily accessible, use one of the many oil changer pumps to do a great job on this task. So once you warm up your engine, there are two different ways of getting the oil out of it. One is to use a manual pump like this one from Moeller, which creates a vacuum and pulls the oil into it. The other is to use an electric pump like this 12-volt model from Parjabsko. So the routine is to find a suction hose which is big enough to pull the oil out but small enough to fit in your dipstick. So in this case, the Moeller pump gives you two different diameters. You just choose the biggest one, which will fit down inside your dipstick. You connect that up here, a little flexible connection. Put this into the top of the pump, and now you give this a couple of quick strokes, and what this will do is pull the oil out through the engine and deposit it inside this chamber. In the case of the Parjabsko pump, this will pump up to 3.5 gallons of oil out of your engine. So if you have two V8s on your engine, this will do both of them. And again, you have a rigid line which you put down inside your dipstick hole, connect up the alligator clips to a battery, and run it until the engine's sucked dry. Again, this works best with a warm engine so that the oil has all of the pollutants and the soot and the acids in solution, so you get as much of that bad stuff out. Then you'll want to replace that oil with some new 4-stroke oil of the proper viscosity and a new oil filter. The engine is now done and ready for a long winter's nap. Two tasks are left to complete the winterizing of the powertrain.
Next, we're going to look at the lower unit. Again, this step only applies if the boat has an outboard or a stern drive. Changing the lower unit fluid now will save this step in the spring and get you out on the water faster. Make sure you have the correct type of lower unit fluid, again based on manufacturer specs. First, remove the vent plug at the top of the lower unit. Remove the drain plug at the bottom of the lower unit, allowing the fluid to drain into a pan. Next, attach the lower unit fluid pump to the drain and pump the fresh fluid in through the drain until the lower unit is full and either begins to come out of the vent or reads full on the dipstick, depending on which model outdrive you have. Consult your owner's manual and make sure to follow their recommendations. Next, replace the vent plug. The vacuum will keep the fluid from rushing out the drain as the pump is removed and the drain plug is replaced. If the old fluid is milky looking or has metal shavings present, it may indicate the need to have the lower unit serviced.